interesting to have a chance to listen to you, to hear different ideas that you have. One of the nice things when we have a chance for you to come down to A&M or any time that I've been at a meeting where we have a chance to socialize with you, get to hear so many of your great ideas and some of the places that you've been. Now, one of the first questions that I had, and I've already previewed this with Dr. Grandin because this is another question that came up earlier where we were eating tonight and the person at the restaurant said, I have a child that's being tested for autism. And she told me that because I told her that we had Dr. Grandin with us. And so when I said something to Dr. Grandin without the person being there, she said, are they verbal? And so the first question...
Well, I need to know the age of the child, for one thing, because if you have a 3-year-old that's not verbal, I don't care what the label is. You have a 3-year-old that doesn't talk. You've got to start working with this kid right now. They're going to need 20 hours of one-to-one teaching language, teaching turn-taking, teaching basic skills like dressing and eating. We need to restrict screen time down to 1 hour a day. And you've got to speak slowly to them. Because when the grown-ups talked fast when I was 4, it went into gibberish. Because I was not hearing hard consonant sounds. So teachers have to slow down when they talk. But the worst thing you can do with a 3-year-old who's not talking, I don't care what the diagnosis is nothing. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. You have 3-year-olds that are not talking, you work with them now. Now, if you can get services, great. If you can't get services, I have a book called The Way I See It. That's my book, but I also recommend a book called Autism Breakthrough, which is a really good book if people have to do it themselves with maybe grandmother church volunteers. But the worst thing you can do is to do nothing with a young little kid who's not talking.
Well, this follows up on this question because this one I've already previewed. And it says, what if you have a family in denial about their 4-year-old who is on the spectrum? Can I be of service to the child in an indirect way? And I think you first said, is the child verbal?
To me, I'm going to, how verbal is the child? Because you see, you can have a child that's just a little professor or a little nerdy, because you see, you get the kids diagnosed early, and that's because of speech delay. But they change the diagnostic guidelines. You see, this is the problem. Diagnosis is not precise, like diagnosing tuberculosis. And they keep changing the guidelines. About half the diagnosis is science, and the other half is doctors squabbling in conference rooms. And in 2013, they changed the diagnosis and took out Asperger's, which was the mild autism with no speech delay. You know, basically half of Silicon Valley. Half of Silicon Valley is probably on the spectrum.
What would be your most impactful piece of advice for teachers of students with autism?
First of all, that's way too generalized. I've got to have age. Okay, let's just take elementary school kids that got some speech. Slow down when you talk to them. Another basic principle is a lot of these kids' brain is like a phone on one bar. You've got to give them time to respond. That's super important. Slow down, enunciate the hard consonants. So when my teacher would hold up a cup, she'd say cup, and then she'd go cuppa. She'd switch back and forth, speak slowly. They also have to learn how to wait and take turns. That was taught to me with board games. Teaching the children how to wait and take turns is really important. But okay, let's say we've got a little older kid. Well, if he's interested in art, I want to build on that. Some kids are good at mechanical things, but today they aren't even getting any chance to do mechanical things. So the kid may be good at Legos, but when they get to be about 10 years old, let's graduate to real tools. You know, use hacksaws on plumbing parts and make things out of wood. They can combine that with the Legos, because the visual thinkers are often really, really good at building things, but they don't get enough opportunity to do it. I've worked with so many brilliant misfits. Well, NASA's got them too. What would happen to them today? Ones that had the vision to do some of the stuff we did with not complicated stuff.
We have a question here. How are your presentations received in other parts of the world?
Well, people want to hear about both autism and livestock. I'm a very practical person, and I want to see a kid do well. I don't want to see a smart kid getting addicted to video games. Because where they're going, I'll tell you where they're going, they're ending up on Social Security playing video games instead of going out and building Cargill plants or building a launch pad or working for SpaceX or some other thing they ought to be doing.
Well, I have witnessed you giving presentations in other parts of the world, and I'd say they're pretty well received.
Well, I want to find, practical ways to improve things. And I'm seeing where there's too much of the identity getting tied up with autism. In fact, when I went to NASA, it was the disabilities people that invited me there. And the only thing they put on the poster was about autism. I actually kind of got on them for that and said, the college professor comes first. And then I just recently thought up the thing about all the last names that are jobs. Carpenter, a farmer, miller, cook, baker, they're all jobs. Real common names.
Okay. We have a question about your movie, and it says, your movie shows you getting your truck all muddy. I don't know if it's muddy, and putting on a hard hat to get into the feed yard.
Well, they did a little compression there. The sneaky in actually was in some meat plants. I snuck into stuff. I did that. Now, the bull testicles on the car actually happened. That happened. And then all the projects shown in the movie were real. And how it showed visual thinking, that was real.
Now, did you help them come up with that? How did the director or producer, whoever came up with all that, how did they come up with that?
Them, you see, the producer of the movie, Emily Gerson-Sains, is the mother of an autistic child. And she wanted the movie to be really good. It took her 10 years to get the right team. There were 2 other teams that worked on the movie, and they didn't know what to do with it. Then they got Mick Jackson, very much a visual thinker, just an absolute great guy, visual thinker.
Well, it's very interesting when you see that and how that works.